Dear members and observers of the International Platform on Sustainable Finance, addressing climate change has never been more urgent. As United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently put it, we have now reached the era of global boiling. People across the whole world are experiencing the impact, from droughts to floods, mudslides, hurricanes, and melting glaciers. But we also know that impact is not evenly distributed across the world, with social inequalities playing a role. All these challenges require a global response. And so we need to come together to tackle them, including here at the COP. The International Platform on Sustainable Finance is a really important forum for this kind of cooperation. As I introduce today's event, I want to reflect on what we've achieved together this year and look ahead to our work for next year. In our fourth year, the International Platform has continued to grow. This year, we welcome Sri Lanka as our 20th member. I want to thank all members and observers for their active contribution that helps move the global conversation on sustainable finance forward. We continue to discuss climate, environmental and social issues, exchange best practices, and work towards making sustainable finance frameworks comparable and compatible. This year, we broadened our agenda to include biodiversity and social issues. And this reflects how sustainable finance has evolved over the last few years. In the annual report published today, you can read about our initial work on biodiversity. And this work will intensify in 2024. Today, we're also proud to present a report on social bonds, as social finance becomes more important. It describes the social finance landscape amongst our members, observers and beyond. It sets out how social considerations may be included in sustainable finance frameworks. And it looks at how the social bond market has developed and at the challenges it faces. The report also presents recommendations to foster social finance. The second half of today's event will showcase this really important work. This year, 2023, the International Platform also developed its work on comparing taxonomies. And this has been a cornerstone of the platform's work since its early days. Its purpose is to facilitate international green and sustainable investments and to ensure coherence and consistency for investors. We call this the Common Ground Taxonomy. And this work has now expanded to new places, starting with Singapore. And it is expanding to new environmental objectives, economic sectors and economic activities. I look forward to seeing this work continue in the months and years to come. Transition finance has also remained central to the International Platform. Different places have different starting points, but we all face challenges around the transition. I sometimes feel that we speak too little about transition finance. And so I'm glad that the International Platform works really hard in this area. Today, we're also publishing an interim report on the practical aspects of transition finance. This builds on the International Platform's transition finance principles. And this work will be the focus of the first part of today's discussion. The aim is to give corporates, financial entities and policymakers practical guidance to help them navigate the complexities of transition finance. This includes looking at progress since last year, identifying gaps and flagging some areas that could benefit from further work. So it is good to come together to celebrate milestones, showing what we can do when we work together. But of course, we all know we still have a long way to go. And indeed, we need to move further and we need to move faster. So I want to thank everyone who's contributed to the success of the International Platform on Sustainable Finance this year. And I look forward to next year when we will continue to work together and move forward together. I know that we're all committed to doing this, to making our sustainable finance frameworks more comparable, to supporting international cooperation, and above all, to advancing the journey towards a more sustainable world. So I do wish you a fruitful discussion today, and thank you.
Dear IPSF members and observers, ladies and gentlemen, It's a pleasure to welcome you to the fourth annual event of the International Platform on Sustainable Finance. My name is Raffaella Setta, and I have the pleasure to chair the IPSF Sherpa, and today I will be moderating this event. You have heard from the IPSF Chair and European Commissioner Mairead McGuinness. The today event will focus on two key areas of activity for the IPSF in 2023: transition finance and social bonds. On the first one, last year, the IPSF presented transition finance principles for ensuring an orderly, credible, and just transition to a low carbon economy. This year, the IPSF sought to provide further clarity on the implementation of these principles, and the interim report we published today is an important step in this direction. Without further ado, I will pass the floor to our speakers to present and discuss the interim report. We will hear first from the two co-chairs of the Transition Finance Working Group, starting with the Swiss co-chair, Christoph Baumann, who will take us through the importance of transition planning and monitoring through reliable data. Christoph, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Raffaella. Dear IPSF members and observers, dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by thanking Commissioner McGuinness for continued leadership in the area of sustainable finance in general, and as a chair of the IPSF in particular. Over the last years, the IPSF has become a key international forum, shaping multilateral and domestic work on disclosures, alignment methods, and more recently, also on transition finance. Switzerland is proud to actively support the IPSF agenda. As co-chair of the working group on transition finance, alongside my European and Japanese colleagues, I feel privileged to present today the IPSF interim report on implementing transition finance principles. This report builds upon the foundational principles outlined in the 2022 IPSF Transition Finance Report for robust transition targets and for demonstrating the capacity to achieve those targets. The interim report identifies 4 dimensions for transition finance: credibility, disclosure, financing, and assessment. These dimensions encompass various principles, strategies, and considerations for effectively transitioning to a sustainable and climate resilient economy. The dimensions are closely linked to the practical steps involved in the transition finance process. Each represents the stages that institutions must navigate to achieve meaningful transition outcomes. The holistic approach enhances the credibility and effectiveness of climate transition initiatives, bridging the gap between ambition and action. Overall, the report underscores the vital role of sustainability reporting and comprehensive transition plans. It emphasizes the need for comparable data and open data platforms, for collaboration among initiatives to support and assess climate efforts effectively. Central to this discourse on transition finance are transition plans. They are emerging as a catalyst for concrete change and a powerful tool embedded within corporate strategy to guide organizations and financial institutions towards more sustainable pathways. The disclosure of transition plans will help to establish a robust, credible, and comparable set of forward-looking information on companies' strategic ambition, strategies, actions, and financing needs throughout the transition. This preliminary report underscores the evolving landscape of transition finance and identifies a number of gaps and areas for further work, including some where the IPSF could specifically play a role and add value. In particular, I would like to mention the work on comprehensive monitoring. A comprehensive monitoring framework from transition finance is essential, considering the importance of the work on assessment methodologies and metrics for whole economy emission reduction. The IPSF could promote guidelines and best practices to track progress transparently, ensuring that transition plans lead to real emissions reductions. The basis for such monitoring is access to high quality data. Towards this end, this week's launch of the Net Zero Data Public Utility constitutes a milestone. It is designed to be an open data platform that presents climate-related information from private sector firms and financial institutions in a comprehensive and comparable manner. While data upload of the NZTPU TPU is currently voluntary, firms have an incentive to disclose comprehensive and granular data. However, governments play also a crucial role in establishing appropriate disclosure frameworks to support the climate data ecosystem and ensure the availability and decision usefulness of climate data. As said, government action is key. Therefore, I would like to mention a major development in Switzerland this summer. The popular vote in June on the Climate and Innovation Law has allowed Switzerland to anchor the 2050 net zero greenhouse gas emissions target into law. It also shows that a large majority, almost 60% of Swiss voters, wants to see climate action. The law also requires all companies headquartered in Switzerland to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. It further mandates the Swiss government to ensure that the Swiss financial center makes an effective contribution to reducing climate impact of financial flows. In particular, measures should be taken to reduce the climate impact of national and international financial flows. I'm eager to learn from and discuss with my IPSF friends and colleagues effective ways how we can assure this. With that, I hand back and greatly look forward to listening to today's IPSF annual event. Thank you very much. Over to you, Raffaella.
Thank you very much, Christoph, for these insights. Now, to complement this discussion on the interim report from the side of practical steps and the importance of practical examples, I'm pleased to introduce the Japanese co-chair of the IPSF Transition Finance Working Group, Satoshi Ikeda. Satoshi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raffaella, and also Christoph for the preceding remarks. And I'd like to thank everyone who contributed to this interim report. I can't thank enough. Of course, I thank the fellow co-chairs, the European Commission and Swiss colleagues, but also for those who actively participated in improving our report, like OECD, EBRD, EIB, and the UK. So thank you all for your contributions. Well, I would like to highlight some of the key points that should be taken by readers and to be shared by the practitioner of transition finance. First point is this report focuses on from ambition to action. So the report outlines action-oriented practical steps for transition finance in terms of credibility, disclosure, financing, and assessment. Credibility part deals with the how issuers or financiers will set a certain target to get transition finance and discusses how that process can be credible. On the disclosure part, after target setting, issuers will go for the asking for certain finance. So in that process, how to appropriately express the ambition and the transition pathway to net zero is critically important. And in that part, we discussed that. And financing part, well, that's where the kind of issuers and the financial institutions will meet. And in that interaction, how actually financing can be credible is discussed in that part. And finally, assessment. Well, after financing those issuers, and the issuers themselves need to assess themselves, and the financial institution need to assess that financing. So what can be done in that context is also highlighted in that part. Secondly, it's a continuity and consistency. Well, as I outlined, our interim report closely interacts and intersects with the target setting and delivery principle proposed by IPSF in the last year's transition finance report. So we certainly build on that principle to elaborate practical steps. Also, I would like to say that the report took a bird's eye overview. So the report identified key initiatives and their interaction for farming up a still evolving framework for transition finance. For example, G-Fund's transition finance strategy guidance and OECD report on carbon lock-in, UK TPT recommendations for transition plan disclosures, and NZTPU proof of concept for making climate data more readily available. Those initiatives come together to form an ecosystem for transition finance. So we try to map those initiatives together so that a reader can have a comprehensive view of the transition finance landscape. Also, the taxonomy approaches for transition finance is another focus of this report. So we elaborated how taxonomies can be of help in facilitating transition finance in the same way as, or maybe in different ways from a pathway approaches. So certainly taxonomy defines a certain greenness. So taxonomies can be used as a target setting, and also taxonomy threshold can be interpreted as a kind of end goal for transition. So all those things are discussed in the report. Also, monitoring and metrics for transition finance is focused. Taxonomies are one form of that metrics. But the report also discusses a variety of transition-related metrics, and in doing so, identifies deficiencies of finance emission metrics and compares a few approaches for overcoming such problems. Also, mainstreaming transition finance for SMEs and EMDEs is another theme that the report focuses on. So we recognize that certain unique challenges faced by SMEs and EMDEs, and commit to do further work on these critical segments for transition finance. And finally, we emphasize that the need for more use cases and practical examples. Well, IPSF envisaged building on the transition finance use cases and practical examples, but could not do so enough by the time of finalizing this interim report. So we promise to work further and develop further guidance, both use cases and practical examples. So we have done quite a work so far, but as always, we have still more to do. And I really look forward to further working with our fellow members and observers for that objective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Satoshi, for this explanation and for stressing the practical side of this work and the future perspective. Now, you know, one of the strengths of the IPSF is that it brings together jurisdictional perspectives of regulators and the global perspective of our observer international organization. Now we will hear from Robert Jungmann more on the credibility of transition finance initiatives and on the OECD work in this field. Robert, handing over to you.
Thanks very much, Raffaella. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, I would like to thank the Chair, Commissioner McGuinness, the IPSF Secretariat, and Christoph Baumann and Satoshi Ikeda for the opportunity to participate in this event. The OECD is very pleased to be an IO observer to the IPSF and to contribute to the IPSF's work. I would like to congratulate the Secretariat on its interim report on transition finance. Today, I will focus on the OECD's recent work on transition finance, the remaining work needed on this important topic, and areas where we plan to contribute. Two elements that Christoph just mentioned are core to the OECD's work and messages in this area. First, the need for credibility in climate transition finance initiatives. Second, the central role of corporate transition plans. To increase environmental integrity and credibility, in 2022, we published the OECD guidance on transition finance, which makes the case for anchoring transition finance transactions in credible corporate transition plans. The guidance sets out 10 key elements of credible transition plans and includes concrete recommendations for each of them. Looking forward, as acknowledged in the interim report, much remains to be done for the transition finance market to scale with integrity. There are at least 5 gaps that we think need to be filled. First, there is significant need in all transition finance approaches to address the risk of carbon lock-in. Last October, the OECD released the report entitled Mechanisms to Prevent Carbon Lock-in in Transition Finance. It found that existing frameworks emphasize the need to avoid carbon lock-in, but largely do not set clear guidance or criteria on how to do so. The report provides good practices to support policymakers to address carbon lock-in risk. For example, it recommends strengthening transition finance definitions by providing clarity on how to assess feasibility as part of eligibility criteria. In our view, a long-term perspective needs to be taken in feasibility assessments, projecting benefits and costs over the long run. Second, as has been noted, SMEs need to be addressed. They account for a remarkably high proportion of companies in many developing as well as developed economies. In 2024, the OECD plans to conduct analysis on transition planning and transition finance for SMEs. We have proposed to contribute this work to Brazil's G20 presidency and the Sustainable Finance Working Group, which is expected to look at challenges SMEs face in sustainable finance in terms of capacity, data provision and access, and cost of finance. A third issue relates to bridging the gaps between sectoral pathways, roadmaps, benchmarks, and alignment with the Paris Agreement. Scenarios used by the financial sector currently to inform net zero targets and transition planning are, in our view, not fit for purpose. A recent OECD analysis found that none of the scenarios that providers currently qualify as net zero, 1.5 degrees Celsius, or below 2 degrees Celsius are fully consistent with stringent interpretations of alignment with the Paris Agreement. The report puts forward recommendations for scenario providers and financial stakeholders on improving the design and use of scenarios by the financial sector. Fourth, there is a need for capacity building in transition planning, including in emerging and developing countries, as noted in the interim report. We need to ensure that corporates and other key actors in the transition finance ecosystem step up their efforts to develop and disclose credible transition plans. Going forward, the OECD will provide capacity building on transition finance issues in Indonesia and other EMDEs in the context of our Clean Energy Finance and Investment Mobilization, CEFIM, program. We look forward to collaborating with IPSF and with other key actors in this space. Fifth and last, as Christoph noted, government action is indeed key. More thinking is needed on what an effective enabling environment for transition finance looks like. Sectoral roadmaps will clearly be important, but policymakers need to consider whether there is sufficient policy clarity, support, incentives, and/or mandates for developing credible transition plans and related disclosure. The OECD looks forward to helping to fill these gaps, including through ongoing collaboration and coordination with IPSF, with the Transition Plan Task Force, ISSB, GFANZ, and other key stakeholders and initiatives. I look forward to the rest of today's event. I will now pass it back to the chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert. Now, with these 3 interventions, we have explored the transition finance in practice from several angles. And the interim report that we present today likewise aims to address the different sides of the equation. You have, as you have all told, there is room for further reflection on how transition finance principles can be implemented in practice and to fill gaps that remain to be filled. And this is something the IPSF can usefully continue working on next year in view of producing a final report. So I would like to thank very much Christoph, Satoshi, and Robert. And I would invite warmly all of you to read the interim report on implementing transition finance principle, which was published today. With that, I think we can move to the second part of the annual event, which will focus on a topic that has been a novelty for the IPSF. This responds to the increasing prevalence of social finance on the international agenda and led the IPSF to conduct a broad analysis of the social bond landscape, identifying challenges and also putting together some recommendations to overcome those challenges. We hope that the report that we have published today, which was led by the European Commission and the Argentina as co-chairs of the Social Bonds Working Group, we hope that this report will trigger further reflections and discussion on the global level, and ultimately facilitate the scaling up of this important market. To introduce to this report the main findings and the recommendation, I'm pleased to first pass the floor to our Argentinian co-chair, Emanuel Andrin. Emanuel, the floor is yours. All okay, Emanuel? It seems we have a little. Yes, waiting for Emanuel to sort out. We have a number of speakers. So other members and observers that contributed to this report, which we can share their perspective. I suggest to continue with Surabhi Gupta of the Securities and Exchange Board of India. Will bring the regulator's perspective and focus on the specificity of emerging markets. So unless Emanuel is ready to go, I will then pass the floor to Surabhi, if you agree, Surabhi.
Yeah, thanks, Rafaela. I would like to first thank IPSF for choosing the topic social bond as a working group theme. It is much timely since the recently concluded G20 SFWG also had one of its priority areas that focused on scaling up of finances in social-related SDGs. So first, why are we talking about social bonds or social financing? It's because the impact and the fallout from the pandemic has been disproportionately damaging to vulnerable and underserved people and communities throughout the region, which has increased the funding gap between needed to attain UN SDGs. Prior to the pandemic, the UN had estimated that developing economies, especially in Asia and Pacific, would face an annual funding gap of around $1.5 trillion. And according to OECD estimates, I'm going to quote you, the COVID-19 pandemic brought this figure up to around 3.7 to 4.2 trillion US dollars. And if we were to take a closer look on the financing for the SDGs, it reveals that between 2012 and 2017, only 6% of private capital funded social sectors. So these developments underscore the need for social bonds, especially the scaling up from private sector. Social bonds may actually help in closing the funding gap by financing social initiatives in line with SDGs. And if I were to talk from emerging market perspective, actually this gap is more acute. social bond issuances in Asia has been hugely lagging behind the European issuances and has been dominated by government agencies. Obstacles to market growth include the lack of standardization of metrics to measure impact, which leads to concerns about social washing, and there is therefore a trust deficit. Basically, funding for the climate environment is in the spotlight. Green bonds are well established with taxonomies, concept of green widely understood. However, there is not much understanding on social risk side, that there are close interlinkages between the climate and social objective is yet to transcend in emerging markets. The potential and focus on social finance is hugely understated, and therefore there is an urgent need for equal focus on social finance and development of a robust social market, especially in emerging markets, considering that social issues are more pronounced here as compared globally. And as Emmanuel will already brief on the challenges and the recommendations that we would bring, that we have already brought about in the working report, number of challenges, and you will find that all those are pertinent. The report acknowledges that financial sector role in relation to addressing societal changes has yet not been fully harnessed. There is dearth of actually private money in this space. So harnessing the power of private capital to meet these critical social needs is an opportunity for both issuers and investors to address these needs in a financial context and to leverage synergies with the commitment towards SDGs. Now, how does a financial regulator fit in this entire space of social finance? Basically, we cannot, as a regulator, we cannot divert funds into social bonds, but we can facilitate scaling up social finances by supporting financial innovation by introducing new modes of financing like blended finance through innovative structure, and B, by building a transparency and trust by mandating disclosures to support issuance and investment in such bonds. So I would like to go a bit in detail to explain the role of regulator from regulator's perspective. First, the innovative instrument part, like we have seen municipal bonds. And nowadays, the concept of blended finance, which is investing for both social and financial gain, has also taken hold around the world and has gained some credence. Here, briefly, I would like to just explain, take a bit moment to take you around a unique concept of social stock exchange, which we are implementing in India, which aims to channelize financial flows into activities with a significant social impact and act as a solution to unlock private capital along with philanthropic money for social causes. The eligible activities on social stock exchange includes those aligned with SDGs and national priorities. So as part of a social stock exchange, we have introduced a number of innovative financial structure, one of which is zero coupon, zero principal instrument. Here, the registered entity, which is a not-for-profit organization, would demonstrate its primarily focus on social objectives for underserved population or region, and they would issue a zero coupon, zero principal bond. So there is no principal payment at maturity. The instrument is not designed to offer any financial return. It would, however, entail the promise of a social return to the funder. And that is what it distinguishes from basically a vanilla donation certificate. We have enabled Social Impact Fund, which is a structure of AIF, to also invest in these instruments. And the other innovative instrument that we have as part of social stock exchange is Development Impact Bond, where there's a funder, a risk taker, and an implementing agency. So the risk taker would get a social project implemented through implementing agency, and the funder would pay the money to the risk taker after it delivers on a pre-agreed social matrix at a pre-agreed cost. We've had a successful development impact bond in India that was focused on educating girls, which was very successful. Now coming to the role of the regulator in mitigating trust deficit through disclosures. Here, ICMA principles stand as a good referral point. The regulators need to formalize quantitative metrics for outcome or the impact reporting by the issuers of social bond. A robust impact reporting and a third-party assurance can go a long way in bridging the trust deficit and attracting capital inflows in such instrument. In fact, what I believe is that social bonds may present a unique opportunity for better governance in bond markets, because issuance of these bonds go hand in hand with disclosure of corporate or government activities and use of proceeds. Also, what I believe is currently the regulator's approach of climate first needs to expand to climate plus approach to include social side as well. We would then see some reorientation from investor side too, who currently largely understand the concept of sustainability and sustainability risk, often ignoring the social risk and climate risk taking the center stage. Even the ratings based on which these asset managers or investors channelize their flows need to again reorient their lens of analyzing the S part to facilitate these flows. To conclude, I want to say that what we currently need is a coordinated approach from all the three participants of the capital market, the regulator, the issuers, and the investors. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rafaela.
Thank you very much, Surabhi. Thank you for underlining this, the importance of linking, of looking at the social dimension of sustainable investment. Now, I understand that Emmanuel is back and able to guide us through the main finding and recommendation of the social bond report. Emmanuel, to you.
Thank you, Rafaela, for the floor. Very sorry for the issues. And thank you, many thanks to the colleagues involved in the organization of this event and for all the work done through the year. Let me start this intervention by sharing with all of you some thoughts on the role and relevance of social finance. The world is facing a crisis stemming from the structural challenges such as growing inequality between and within countries, unsustainable debt in many countries, and risks from climate change and biodiversity loss impacting directly on our economy. The consequences of these challenges have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and geopolitical tension, especially among vulnerable countries and communities. These challenges have been increased food and energy insecurity, unemployment, and pushes millions of people into poverty, which exposes a large funding gap, especially impacting social safety net and the unequal access to basic services such as education, healthcare, and housing in various sectors of the society. The development of sustainable finance plays a crucial role in addressing the consequences of this crisis. However, sustainable finance is generally associated with a move toward a sustainable economy with a climate perspective, where the role of the financial sector is fully recognized. Despite this, the full potential of sustainable finance to address societal challenges such as urbanization, digitalization, and reducing inequalities has yet to be realized. Social bonds, including social impact bonds, offer the opportunity to finance the goals of the 2030 Agenda, reducing the potential negative consequences associated with a transition to a disorderly low-carbon economy. It is also an investment opportunity that increases the transparency and accountability of the issuer's project. This instrument can be used to finance a wide range of projects with social benefits, enabling citizens to access basic infrastructure and essential services such as healthcare, education, and affordable, but also for job creation and employment generation, sustainable food security, and social economic advancement and empowerment of underserved groups such as women and children. The rapid rise of social bonds has been built on demand from investors interested in making a positive impact on society in addition to generating financial returns. The bond issuance and issuance framework in place in different jurisdictions have been leveraged by the collaborative development that have taken place in recent years in terms of guidelines and labels, most notably the International Capital Market Association Social Bond Principle. The context of the pandemic prompted many countries to seek the necessary funding to sustain economic activity and meet social expenditures. Since then, relevant developments in this area have taken place, such as Japan's social bond guidelines or India's social exchange, while many countries have issued social bonds in recent years to mitigate the pandemic. Others have worked with a long-term visions, developing social and sustainable bond frameworks that allow them to access greater financial flows for projects with social impact, including gender equality. In this sense, the development of framework in several Latin American countries such as Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico stand out with subsequent issues. Despite all these milestones, the social bond market is less developed than the green bond market. The report we are presenting today goes through this diagnosis and the challenges we have found in different jurisdictions from the point of view of sovereign issuers. And while capital markets differ in composition and depth across countries, many common challenges were found. This is why we identify key findings and potential issues to be addressed. And this brings me to the last point of my intervention. Some of the main challenges we face for the development of this market are a lack of a clear and common understanding on what social needs of credit mean and which economic activities are the ones that contribute substantially to the social objective. The impact of this is a lack of clarity about what social investment implies and its impact. Hence, scaling up social bond market requires a joint effort that can only be achieved through international cooperation. It's time to address the supply and demand side needs in terms of what is missing to have an investment-friendly environment for the social bond market. And this is why where I think we need to continue working to generate comparable and interoperable sustainable financing frameworks that support the issuance of bonds or loans that finance programs and projects with positive impact in each jurisdiction. Last but not least, public authorities, regulators, and standard setting bodies, in addition to generating broader policies to support social objectives, play a crucial role in shaping the regulatory framework and promoting the responsible investment practice, promoting and enabling transparency, accountability, and the long-term sustainability of investment. In this regard, I would also like to stress that governments should collaborate with standard setting bodies to ensure that the methodologies and standards used by credit rating agencies are interoperable and transparent, enabling market development and resource mobilization on a large scale. Let me stop here and thanks all the members who have participated in this collaborative work and all those who have joined us today in this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for your reflection, for your work on this important report and for sharing your insights. Now, we have heard the regulator's perspective and I mean the challenges and findings identified. Now it will be interesting to hear a bit the issuer's perspective, and we have here representing the European Investment Bank, Tomomitsu Maruta, who, as you know, since the EIB, European Investment Bank, has been working with issuers across Europe and the world for several years, Tomomitsu is with us to share the capital market experience and discuss the contribution that a strong social bond market can make to the overall clarity of what social finance is. So I will pass the floor to Tomomitsu.
Thank you very much, dear Rafaela. Dear Commissioner McGuinness, dear Excellencies, members and observers of the International Platform Sustainable Finance, as well as the distinguished members of the audience. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the co-chairs of the platform's Social Bonds Working Group, who are, as you have heard, the Ministry of Argentina, the Ministry of Finance of Argentina, as well as the Commission. And I would like to thank them for the coordination of this groundbreaking report on social bonds. It has not been an easy task, but it has worth all the efforts. The two core points of my intervention today will be, first, a focus on a decisive recommendation of the Social Bonds report, and two, how the IB has been providing concrete contributions for the implementation of this major recommendation from the Social Bonds report. Enough suspense. What is the recommendation of the utmost importance that I would like to stress? Well, as the title of the report says, scaling up social bonds can help furthering clarity in social finance. And I would like even to qualify this in saying that scaling up social bonds volume and quality can serve this noble goal. How can we do this? Well, the recommendation of the report, which is the last one, the final word before the annex, highlights the value of a dialectic process between social bond issuers and social bond investors. A dialogue on what, would you say? Well, it's about a standard neutral classification of social finance. This classification, this standard neutral classification, could be nurtured with hands-on capital markets contributions. we have heard that there is no one-size-fits-all approach in this area. There is just the need for more comparability across markets, as this was highlighted earlier by Commissioner McGuinness, Japan Financial Services Agency, Ikeda-san, as well as our colleagues from the Ministry of Finance of Argentina, Mr. Andrin. So this idea of a standard neutral classification takes us back to the G20 and its Green Finance Synthesis Report in 2017. So in 2017 already, there was this idea that lack of clarity in sustainable finance is a key challenge for actions by market actors. And this challenge applies mutatis mutandis as well as in social finance. Lack of clarity is a core challenge, a core obstacle. So we need some pragmatic dialogue on core social aspects that can be thematized by social bonds, by concrete transactions. Such concrete capital market topics can contribute to a higher comparability between local markets and therefore to increasing market interoperability for the benefit of cross-border investments serving social objectives. I come now to the second part of my intervention. How has the IB been contributing to the implementation of this idea of a standard neutral classification? Well, we can say that, and as this was mentioned by Ms. Aceta earlier, the IB has a long-standing experience in capital markets working for sustainable development. The IB has issued the world's first green bond in 2007. This inaugural transaction was structured by Aldo Romani, the head of the team where I work, which is the sustainable finance team from the capital markets department. The IB is the largest supranational issuer of green and sustainability bonds with external assurance by a supervised auditor, and has issued the equivalent of more than 84 billion euros in these formats. And these bonds have been issued across 23 currencies, which is a record in the market, and also testify to the international value of these bonds. So based on this concrete capital market experience, the IB can testify to the interest of investors, of regulators, and issuers in this standard neutral classification of sustainable finance. This was the case already many years ago. This was evidenced in 2017 as well as in 2018 on the occasions of a series of white papers on the need for a common language in green finance that we published jointly with the China Green Finance Committee and under the aegis of People's Bank of China. So this idea of a standard neutral classification concretely was not only put to the fore of markets' attention with these white papers, but also with concrete transactions. And we have been applying this idea not only on the green side, but also on the social side of the sustainability spectrum. We have applied it to social objectives with our so-called sustainability awareness bonds since 2018. We have issued more than 15 billion euros of these bonds and across 8 currencies, including currencies such as Polish zloty and Mexican peso. And in absence of a common reference for social aspects, the IB has adopted an entrepreneurial capital market spirit and its technical expertise for project evaluation in light of its in-house knowledge of the EU legislation for sustainability objectives and of its in-house practice of the evaluation of projects in the real economy. The results of this innovative philosophy and social objectives have been inspired by the SDGs and the EU legislative framework, and we have published LGBT criteria that are in line with the logic of the EU taxonomy, that are easy to use and easy to verify. For this, we have used international indicators. We have heard Mr. Youngman from the OECD earlier. So we use, for example, the PISA indicators in the area of education. And we are also using indicators from our colleagues in the UN Galaxy. So I say hello to Mr. Nolan, who will speak later today. We have used, for instance, the Universal Health Coverage Index from the UN Specialized Health Agency, the World Health Organization. So on this note, I would like to conclude by saying that all these indicators are easy to use and easy to verify because all our frameworks reports have been audited with reasonable assurance, which is the highest level of assurance in the market. And I thank you very much for your kind attention, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much to you, Tomomitsu, for sharing this interesting concrete experience of the IAB on the ground, on the capital markets. Now, as you mentioned already, last but definitely not least, I'm very pleased to welcome Stephen Nolan of the UN Development Program, who will share with us his insights on the finding of the report based on the UNDP very rich experience with social bonds. So, Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raffaella, and thank you for including us in today's session. So look, I'm in COP, trying moving around from room to room to find a quiet space. As Christoph said earlier on, it's quite manic here, but 70,000 people wandering about, but there's a lot happening, which is great to see. And as I mentioned earlier on, UNDP, we're delighted to be an observer to the IPSF, and thank you for including us today. And of course, congratulations on the publication. As we're our previous colleague, and I was on a panel yesterday from EIB, it's incredible to see EIB become Europe's climate bank and the different efforts they're doing in the space, which are tangible and having a real impact on the ground, and not just in Europe, but also in emerging and developing economies as well. The UNDP has a moonshot of $1 trillion by 2025 in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. A lot of the work that we undertake, Raphael and colleagues, is undertaken through the UNDP Sustainable Finance Hub, of which I'm a member. There are 170 people across the Sustainable Finance Hub working on different activities in this area, not least in the area of social bonds. Raphael, across our offerings, we have 5. We support members in public finance, unlocking private capital and line and business operations for the SDGs, SDG impact management and finance tracking, integrating national financial frameworks and portfolios, and then finally the SDG Finance Academy. And again, Raphael, here in COP this week, in regard to the finance agenda, it's very obvious to see the role of capacity building, talent development within regulators, within market actors, and within policymakers. So we saw the launch of the GFAN's Coalition of Building Capacity earlier on this week. Tomorrow we see a Chinese initiative go live in the area of capacity building, and then from the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, UNDP is delighted to be pushing forward with the TAP, Technical Assistant Advisory Platform. So a lot happening in the capacity building space. Raffaella, within our work, and country work across 170 countries and territories, social issues and the finance are key, as one could imagine, in light of the SDGs. And indeed, social bonds are a cornerstone in achieving sustainability objectives within the financial system. The social bond market has grown quite rapidly year on year, as the report has shown, and it's the sharpest annual growth this year in our last year in any team since the inception of the Green, Social and Sustainability, or GSS, debt market. As a result, we within the UNDP Sustainable Finance Hub, our efforts in supporting governments explore the area of how best to finance social activities has grown quite rapidly. We're seeing more questions, and we're supporting governments as they seek to develop social linked bonds or social bonds. And at this point, we are supporting several member states undertake various different analysis of what they can do and what the market may take in this whole area of social financing, which is quite interesting, as one can imagine. Indeed, Raphael, in the last 2 years alone, we've helped 11 of our member states unlock 14 billion in additional capital in support of the SDGs through our work supporting them as they develop the different bonds in this area. Some of the challenges, and link back, Raffaella, to the report, is the size of the social bond market. It's equivalent to just under 28% of the green bond market. It's even bigger in the sovereign thematic debt market, where social issues are just limited to just under 6%. So there's a lot more to do. And again, I suppose, Raffaella, going back to some of the comments from earlier colleagues, a lot of this is also about raising awareness of the possibility of using social bonds. Again, hence the report and the working group is so important at the IPSF, which is driving that. And a lot of different things. Again, Raffaella, discussions here today and yesterday around the importance of the regulatory action, but also that policy certainty and policy signaling. And so again, how can we increase the size of the social bond market within the overall bond market? A lot of it's going to be down to people that are on this call in terms of regulators and policy actors and policy leaders such as yourself, Raffaella. Another key challenge, Raffaella, as we're seeing is the scaling up for social bond issuance and social finance as a whole, is the lack of a clear and common understanding of social objectives economic activities that substantially contribute to them, and social risks. So again, a lack of a common definition. Again, Raffaella from here, been on the ground the last 24 hours. There is at times a sense of people being overwhelmed, the various different standards and disclosures and what has been put forward to them. But on the panels that I've been on, it's been very clear as well that we need these as we develop out the sustainable finance agenda. We do need to see more standards and norms, and we are in the process of bringing them to play. And I think Europe and Commissioner McGuinness needs to be complimented because it is obviously Europe's leadership, and that's been coming across here over the last few days. But again, that lack of common definition. And again, another area discussed the last 24 hours, Raffaella, was the whole issue of interoperability between different jurisdictions. And again, hence the reason why the IPSF is so important, is, as you said, it brings countries from around the world together to discuss and then hopefully have that interoperability as people develop these definitions and standards. The other point, Raffaella, is the importance of developing scope-sensitive criteria and objectives. Again, that lack of clarity about social investments and impacts is having a negative impact. And while environmental objectives and criteria can generally be based on environmental science, social objectives are often even more of qualitative and contextual nature. So we need to tackle specific social programs, or tackling specific social programs requires identification of specific indicators. And while there are some existing international social indicators, these may not all be fit to local specificities. And that's an interesting comment from my colleague from EIB before, and it's great to hear that he's using UN and OECD data to support their work. But again, going back, Raphael, if I may, over the last 24 hours, the whole challenge of data has come up, the quality of the data that's been used to underpin a lot of this activity. So again, perhaps with Europe and the IPSF taking a lead, some of these new indicators can be looked at and invest and put into developing them robustly. So in terms of kind of just bringing my intervention to a close, Raffaella, that independent verification and insurance mechanisms are crucial to ensure credibility and trustworthiness of the social bonds. So developing the verification and insurance market, enhancing the availability of data, I've mentioned already, Raffaella, to match capital to real needs, and monitor progress on social investments. Investment in relevant social data at the local and global level is crucial. And we as the UNDP can play a big role in that, given that we're in 170 countries and territories. We need to leverage blended finance, or leverage blended finance, given the quantum of funds needed for supporting and achieving social goals. There's a need for catalyzing private capital in projects that contribute to sustainable development while providing financial returns to investors. And then go back to a point I said earlier on, Raphael, strengthening regulatory oversight. Regulatory bodies should play an active role in promoting and monitoring the issue of social bonds. And that's why it's great to see our colleague from India on this call. So in summary, Raffaella, it's been very interesting. I've been at the last 3 COPs, and this COP has been very interesting to see the different areas come out across the day in terms of the Finance Day. Biodiversity has been a big topic, but actually so has social as well, and a lot of the panels and events that I've attended. So again, really timely in terms of publications, and congratulations to you and the Secretariat and the working group of the IPSF.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stephen, for sharing your insight of the UNDP experience and for acknowledging the role of the IPSF and the importance of looking into this topic. With that, I would also like to thank once again all our speakers for their thoughtful insights, and I would invite also all of you to read the IPSF social bond report that has the transition finance interim report was published today. And this concludes the 2023 annual event of the IPSF. We thank you very much, all the speakers, all those who listen to us, and we look forward to continuing our work with IPSF members and observers to promote comparability and interoperability of sustainable finance framework in 2024. We'll stress the importance of this objective. We hope that all of you will follow us along this journey, and thank you again for turning in today, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Raffaella.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much.